In the early days of file sharing, millions of people logged on to Napster, saw a catalog of digital music they could download for free, and took it. Without a physical CD to steal, the traditional boundaries of theft blurred, leaving users to question if a digital file actually carried the same moral weight as physical property. This gets even messier when we look at the other end of the transaction. If you download software without paying, and the person who made it, say Bill Gates, is worth $40 billion, the act feels different to many than stealing from a neighbor. We find ourselves forced to weigh the harm to a massive corporation against the benefit to an individual. For most of human history, society did not have to debate these ambiguities. If you wanted to know if an action was right or wrong, you consulted a sacred text or a priesthood. The rules were handed down by a divine authority, providing an absolute, unquestionable framework for how to live. Today, navigating life without that universally accepted divine rulebook leaves the burden of judgment entirely on the individual. We are left with what philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce called the irritation of doubt, a persistent search for clarity in a world where the old answers no longer apply. To understand the origin of this uncertainty, we have to go back to classical Athens. In this society, morality was straightforward. Actions were judged by whether they invited the approval or the wrath of the gods. Then Socrates posed a question known as the Euthyphro dilemma. He asked his peers, is an action good because the gods approve of it, or do the gods approve of it because it is good? This flowchart shows the logical trap Socrates set. If the gods approve of an action because it is good, then the standard of goodness sits above them. Goodness exists entirely independent of divine authority. Even the gods have to abide by it. While divine law remained the primary moral foundation for centuries to come, Socrates established a lasting logical precedent. He demonstrated that morality could be understood as a standard of reason that exists with or without the endorsement of a higher power. Centuries later, as the scientific enlightenment began to challenge religious authority, philosophers tried to build a new foundation. Immanuel Kant, for instance, attempted to replace divine mandates with absolute human logic. He argued for rigid moral rules, like the requirement that one must never lie, regardless of the consequences. But strict logic fractures when applied to real human suffering. If you are forced to choose between telling a lie or allowing an innocent person to be killed, honoring the absolute rule causes obvious harm. A rigid system cannot adapt to the messy nuances of actual life. By the 19th century, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche looked at these failed attempts and recognized a harsh reality. The objective moral systems constructed by Western civilization, whether based on religion or pure reason, were losing their grip on the human mind. When Nietzsche famously declared that God is dead, he was diagnosing a cultural crisis. He saw that by making God irrelevant to their moral and ethical foundations, Western thinkers had accidentally eviscerated the belief system that gave human purpose its meaning. Without a deity or infallible logic to guide us, humanity was left in a terrifying vacuum. Life was stripped of its predetermined purpose, leaving us stranded in a reality where the old rules of right and wrong had dissolved into dust. It is crucial to note that Nietzsche's diagnosis was heavily distorted after his death. His sister, Elizabeth, took control of his archives and selectively edited his writings to promote her own nationalistic agendas. Nietzsche himself did not intend his philosophy to justify Nazi aggression or racial dominance. Instead, his core concept, the will to power, was a life-affirming instinct. In a world devoid of cosmic rules, he argued that creatures must rely on their innate drive for self-mastery, upward mobility, and personal growth. Following World War II, the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre looked at this empty moral universe and expanded it into the framework of existentialism. Sartre argued that existence precedes essence. A knife is created with a specific purpose or essence in mind, but humans simply appear in the world first, with no pre-programmed instructions. Because we have no inherent design, we must invent our own reason for being. This realization brings a sense of profound anguish. We have no divine safety net to catch us, and no sacred text to blame if things go wrong. we bear the absolute responsibility of choosing our own values from a completely blank slate. The philosopher Albert Camus examined this exact problem. He looked out at the universe and saw a silent, indifferent space that offered no answers to our desperate search for clarity. Camus defined this condition as the absurd. It is the inescapable friction between the human desire for objective meaning and a cold reality that refuses to provide one. He illustrated this through the ancient Greek myth of Sisyphus. For defined gods, Sisyphus was condemned to an eternity in the underworld, forced to push a heavy boulder up a steep mountain, only to watch it roll back down every single time he reached the top. It is an endless cycle of futile labor. If our existence on Earth is as pointless as Sisyphus's punishment, and there are no objective moral rules to punish us after we die, what stops any of us from simply embracing pure selfishness? Camus offered a solution in his novel, The Plague. He tells the story of a physician, Dr. Rieu, who exhausts himself fighting an unstoppable, deadly disease in a quarantine city, knowing full well he cannot save everyone. Dr. Rieu does not fight the disease because a god commanded him to, or because he hopes to earn a heavenly reward. His heroism relies entirely on common decency. He chooses empathy and fairness simply as an act of rebellion against suffering. Morality has shifted from a set of rules we passively obey to a structure we must actively build. In the absence of divine law, our values are defined by the choices we make and the responsibilities we assume toward others. Viewing the loss of objective meaning as a moment of humanity's maturation allows us to see our effort as its own reward. By choosing to push the rock of decency in a universe that doesn't care, we own our fate. We find meaning in the act itself, fulfilling Camus' decree that, ultimately, one must imagine Sisyphus happy.